In 2012, Liz Gutfahr ran for Santa Cruz County, Arizona treasurer for the first time and won in a narrow three-way primary where she got 43% of the vote. She went on to win in the general election and was re-elected in 2016 and 2020. In April 2024, Liz was well on her way to winning re-election again, running unopposed. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, she resigned. That's right. A county official, a comfortable incumbent, just up and quit. And no one knew why. But it wouldn't be long before everyone would find out.
Are you an accountant with a continuing education requirement? You can earn free NASBA-approved CPE for listening to this episode. Just visit earmark.app in your web browser, take a short quiz, and get your certificate.
This is Oh My Fraud, a true crime podcast where cheaters always prosper, at least temporarily. I'm Caleb Newquist. How's it going? Nice to see you. What is going on? There is a development in my life that is probably something that some of you can relate to, and it's a little sensitive, it's a little personal, but I've also shared some personal stuff in the past. So if you don't care for it, then get to the episode. I'm sure I'm sure some of you that's what you're here for. But I have to say that I have started using a CPAP machine, and I'm kind of on the fence, but it's early days. And yes, I have severe obstructive sleep apnea, and my doctor says it's probably because I'm just, anatomically, had some bad luck because I'm, a lot of people say, overweight, other things that contribute to severe obstructive sleep apnea. And I do not have those things. And so just by, luck of the draw, I have this, and now I am treating it. And I don't know how it's going. It's still early. I'll keep you updated, but I don't feel as tired, but I also didn't feel tired before. And so maybe I was just tired all the time and didn't realize it, because that's a strange thing. My body just kind of acclimated to the fatigue. I'm like, this is how I feel all the time. But I never felt bad. I had enough energy to exercise and chase my kids around and do a bunch of other stuff. But I guess I've just been sleep deprived for 30 years. God, that's a fucking weird thing to think about. Anyway, maybe the next 30 I'll be very well rested. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, never too late, I guess. So that's what I got for you. I don't know if that's it. If you don't like that, I understand. If you don't like it. Should we do some mail? We'll do some mail. All right. Hey there, Caleb. I'm a long-term fan. Thanks for a great show. In Monkey Business episode 79, would it be fair to say that there's an additional lesson that standard financial audit does a terrible job of detecting fraud? Per the ACFE, only 3% of frauds come to light through a financial audit. And if I understood correctly, the Columbus Zoo is getting regular financial audits, but not forensic ones. Why is this important? At least in the nonprofit world, there's a widespread myth, especially among boards of directors, that a quote-unquote clean audit on a standard financial audit means that there's no fraud, that there's nothing to worry about. In the case of many nonprofits, including, it would seem, the Columbus Zoo, this myth breeds complacency. What do you think? Thanks, Sean. Thank you, Sean. Yeah, maybe I failed to mention it in that episode about the Columbus Zoo, but external audits, as you rightly point out, are only cited in 3% of cases in the ACFE's report to the nations as how a fraud is detected. And yeah, that's not very good. So it would seem that audits are not good at detecting fraud. And also, I think the point that you make about nonprofits is a good one. Nonprofit boards are filled with people who have a wide variety of backgrounds, and most of these people are not experts on accounting and auditing. Ergo, I can't imagine that they would have a good understanding of what external audits are and are not supposed to do. And that could mean a clean audit could be easily misconstrued as meaning there's no fraud. So if you're listening and you serve on a nonprofit board, or if you're an advisor to nonprofits, like it seems Sean might be, particularly small ones, yeah, part of, I think, your job is to educate them and be like, look, an audit is not this silver bullet for fraud. They don't know what they don't know. So tell them, Anyway, thanks for the email, Sean. Here's another one from a former colleague of mine who I am just going to call Mark. Hi, Caleb. I blew through several episodes during a long drive the other day. Not sure now which episode it was, but the listener letter about the 10 key made me chuckle. A few months ago, I was finally annoyed enough using the calculator app on my phone that I dug out my old 10 key from the days at KPMG, and it has retaken a place on my desk. Wanted to send you a note following the episode on the informant. In case you are looking for more similar ideas, maybe you'd be interested in doing one on the TV show Ozark. Thanks for making the show. It is an entertaining way to get CPEs. Regards, Mark. Mark, thanks for that email. I'll address the Ozark bit first. We probably will not do an Ozark episode, and there's a very good reason for that, and it's quite simple, and that is there's way too much to watch. I don't remember how many seasons it goes. It's a great show. I didn't end up finishing it, but I definitely enjoyed it, especially the early seasons. The money laundering stuff was super interesting. So on the surface, it is a good idea, but from a practical perspective, there's just way too much to watch. So I don't know. Maybe somebody out there has an idea how we could boil that down into a single podcast episode. But it's not us. No, sorry. Anyway, so the 10 key. Yes, I'm still getting emails about 10 key calculators. And I knew this was not an imposter because Mark sent a picture of the 10 key, and it is the model that I had when I was at KPMG. And so I was able to verify that. Anyway, thanks to everyone who writes in. I read all the emails. I try to respond to most of them, maybe not the insane ones. There are some screeds. We do get some screeds. I can't read the screeds. It's just a bit too much. But I try to respond to lots of the emails, even if it takes me a little while. Also, thanks to everybody who rates the show on your podcast platform of choice, whether that's Apple, Spotify, Earmark, wherever. If you go to the trouble of doing anything, writing anything, review or email, I just might read it out loud for a future recording. Okay? All right. Also, if your firm or company or conference or event needs a live or virtual presentation on fraud or ethics, that is something that I'd be happy to talk to you about. So email ohmyfraud@earmarkcpe.com to get more information on pricing and availability for something like that. All right. That's enough business. Time for some fraud. If you drive out of Tucson on Interstate 19, it won't be long before you hit Santa Cruz County, the smallest county by area in Arizona. You know how when you look at Arizona on a map and its southern border is basically two straight lines, one that runs directly east-west and that other one that runs kind of northwest-southeast, slightly northwest-southeast? Where those two lines meet, that point of intersection, if you remember geometry, that Santa Cruz County sits right there. Okay? The county seat is Nogales, population of approximately 20,000, and it is literally a border town. It combines with Nogales, Sonora, Mexico, to make for the largest transborder agglomeration in Arizona. So there you go. Impress people at your next dinner party. More than $26 billion in imports and exports pass through the Mariposa port of entry in Nogales each year. That's a lot. Approximately 60% of winter produce consumed in the U.S. and Canada passes through there. The port of entry is critical for economic production, supporting more than 4,000 jobs in the area. And that's where today's story takes place. Elizabeth Liz Gutfahr was raised in Santa Cruz County, attending Nogales High School, and graduating in 1979. Liz spent decades working in real estate, but was also active in community and public service, serving a 2-year term on the governing board of a local school district and founding the Rio Rico Women's Association. She was also involved in her local church and Rotary Club. Liz began her political career running for county treasurer, first winning in 2012, and then reelected in 2016 and 2020. In 2024, she was running unopposed for her 4th term when she suddenly quit on April 11th, 2024. Her letter of resignation to the County Board of Supervisors cited, quote, health and personal reasons, and it was effective April 12th. About a week went by before more details were revealed, and those details were troubling. On April 19th, 2024, the Patagonia Regional Times reported that county officials, quote, had notified Gutfahr that she was to be suspended while an investigation into possible irregular bank transfers was conducted. This happened a week before Gutfahr had submitted her resignation. So what had happened a week before? I'm going to tell you. In that same story, it was also reported that JP Morgan Chase had alerted the county about evidence of suspicious transactions. The bank was ready to freeze all the accounts, but that was going to be a problem because the county needed to run payroll like the next day or in a very short time frame. They had to run payroll and pay some bills. So not good to freeze accounts. So the bank agreed to keep the accounts active if and only if the signers on the account, the current signers on the account, were changed. So that meant Liz Gutfahr's access had to be revoked. The story also reported that just a few days prior, the FBI had executed a search warrant on one of her properties. But that's all that was known at the time. The local NBC affiliate spoke to Manny Ruiz, the county chairman, who said this of Gutfahr, quote, she's been a good member of our community, a trusted person. She's a businesswoman. At the end of the day, it was a big shock. And, this is my favorite part, it would not be a local news report without an anonymous quote from someone who's just, tossing due process out the window. And here's the quote. I think she's liable. I think she took the money. And that was from a Santa Cruz resident who did not want to be identified. And this article goes on, people living in Santa Cruz County are mad that this happened under the reign of a woman who has held the job for more than a decade. Quote, never think of people like that doing that, said the unidentified man. Now, regular listeners to the show will take great umbrage with this last statement because, as we've learned, people like that are always the people who wind up accused of fraud. So, anyway, more people need to listen to this show, and then they won't say things like that to local TV stations, okay? But, also due process. That's still a thing, too. So, the county launched an investigation into what had happened. Less than 2 months after the news broke, some details started coming to light. In early June, representatives from school districts and fire districts across Santa Cruz County attended a county board of supervisors meeting where they learned some specifics about the irregular transactions that Chase Bank had flagged. There were 11 of them, 11 transactions, and each one was $375,000. That made for a total of $4.1 million. The chief of the Sonoita Elgin Fire District and superintendent of Sonoita School District both issued statements as they were asked to review their records for any irregularities between the revenue they earned and the actual money they received. In each case, county officials reiterated that the investigation was ongoing and everyone was cooperating with the federal investigators on the case. So that was the bad news. And that's it. There was only bad news. Later that summer, in late July, officials got more bad news. An analysis by a local accounting firm found that more money was missing. A lot more. About $35 million more. A total of $39.4 million had gone accounted for. The community was outraged, of course, with these new revelations, and speculation about how it was pulled off continued. One resident told the Patagonia Regional Times, quote, "Now more than ever, I am convinced that in order to steal that kind of money, she had help. Either that help was the form of incompetence on the part of her supervisors or directly in the form of accomplices. Either way, I hope they are all held accountable." Just a couple days later, Santa Cruz County sued Liz Gutfahr and her husband David and son Davian and several entities controlled by them for the alleged embezzlement. In the lawsuit, which you can see in the show notes, the county charged them with fraud, conversion, civil conspiracy, racketeering, and breach of fiduciary duty. Santa Cruz County's lawsuit spared no details in its allegations. It claimed that Gutfahr has made 181 illegal wire transfers from the county's bank accounts to the account of one of her businesses, Rio Rico Consulting. These transfers ranged in amount from $25,000 to $2,950,000. The lawsuit claimed that she made these transfers over the course of 10 years, beginning in March 2014 and ending in March 2024. March 2014 was less than 2 years after she was first elected treasurer of Santa Cruz County. Okay, so $39.4 million is allegedly missing. Is $39,412,100 to be exact. And the lawsuit noted that the vast majority of money came from the county's savings account, so there's lost interest to consider, which amounted to $1,349,666. That made the total loss to the county to be $40,761,766, all in 10 years. So, disturbing, yes, but also very impressive. Now, if these circumstances sound familiar, then there's a good reason for that. Longtime listeners of the show certainly remember episode 3, where Greg Kite and I discussed the case of Dixon, Illinois. In that one, a municipal comptroller, Rita Crunwell, embezzled over $50 million from the city of Dixon. She conducted her fraud over the course of more than 20 years. Rita stole a lot of money in a relatively short period of time, an average of $2.5 million a year. You don't have to be a numbers wizard to realize that the lawsuit against Liz Gutfahr alleged that she was stealing at a faster clip than Rita. $39.4 million over 10 years, $3.9 million a year. Now, I don't know about you, but if I think about what I was doing from March 2014 to March of 2024, there was a lot that happened. I moved a couple times. I got married. Some kids showed up. I traveled quite a bit. I changed jobs. I started this podcast. And, like all of you, I lived through a global pandemic. I mean, a lot happens in 10 years. But you know what I didn't do during that entire time? I didn't carry out a fraud. And we've alluded to this in many episodes, but I just want to expand on it a little more. And that is this. The practicalities of carrying on a fraud for that long are kind of mind-bending. I just covered the high points of what I remember doing for 10 years. And you know what else happens over the course of 10 years? Lots of stuff that's not even worth mentioning. Like, I worked a lot. I wrote a lot. I got sick many times. No hospital visits that I can recall, but, I definitely was sick a few times, many times, especially after having kids. I definitely was getting sick. I'm happy to say that during that period of time, the number of hangovers I had was steadily going down. So that's progress. That suggests progress of some kind, right? I also went to several weddings, several funerals, lots of therapy sessions. And I guess my point is, we don't really think too much about how everyday life is so boring. Like, life itself is miraculous and a complete wonder. But when you break it down day by day, in between these big moments that you can recall, there are plenty of days that are, exceptionally dull. But if you're carrying on a fraud, does that mean that every day is kind of exciting or terrifying? You have to be on every day, like vigilant to the point of rampant paranoia. And that sounds exhausting. I don't know if there's any amount of money that would make carrying on a fraud for 10 years worth it. I know Kelly Richmond Pope tells us that everybody's got their number, and I'm sure I have my number, but it's a big number. If I had to carry on a fraud and sweat it out for a decade, it would be a big number, a very big number. And we've talked about this many times. You can't even take a vacation, right? Even if you're on vacation, and even if you manage to take a vacation while you're doing a fraud, you're not going to enjoy it, are you? I mean, can you even enjoy the money that much at all? I mean, people seem to try, but you're always thinking about how to hide it, how to launder it. The practical things of carrying on a fraud every single day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, it's just so far beyond a full-time job. Think about how exhausting a full-time job can be, and then think about it consuming everything in your life. I don't know. Maybe I'm describing the job you have right now. And if that's the case, I don't know. If you hit your breaking point, you can just quit, right? But if you quit a fraud, you get caught. And what happens next is not going to be good. And so you have this crushing amount of dread. I have to imagine. I don't know personally, but I have to imagine there's a crushing amount of dread. And I think the vast majority of people are not psychologically capable of dealing with that, like processing it on a day-to-day basis. Like the compartmentalization that would be required, it just doesn't really seem possible. I don't know. Someday we will get a psychologist in here to talk about this. I'd like to anyway. Or if you're listening and you want to talk to me about this and you're a psychologist, that would be great. Okay? That's an open invitation. Not an empty gesture. All right, so 10 years. How does one keep a fraud hidden for that long? The lawsuit claimed that Gutfahr did this in 3 ways. Okay? Way number 1, she only wired funds from August through May. Okay? That's 10 months out of the 12 months of a year, but whatever. Anyway, she avoided June and July. And the lawsuit explains that this was because the county's fiscal year ended on June 30, and during its annual audits, the Auditor General only looked at the year-end financial statements to verify those balances. Liz knew this, and so she just didn't wire herself money during that time. And so the auditor, apparently not testing transactions out of that period, outside of that time frame, they would never see the transfers to Liz's businesses. Okay? Hiding fraud tactic number 2. Liz misrepresented the total outstanding, quote, unquote, daily warrants and reconciliations. So we're gonna talk about this. So obviously, the county's general ledger, its accounting, its books, if you like, they did not include Gutfahr's wire transactions to Rio Rico Consulting. She's not going to book a credit to cash and a debit to embezzlement expense, right? She's not going to do that. So the financial statements or the treasurer's report, they did not reflect the actual balance of the county's bank accounts, okay? Anyone can look at the ledger and see one number. They could look at bank statements and see that they wouldn't agree, right? So that's why accountants do reconciliations. They have to reconcile the bank to the book. It's this process of identifying the differences between the books and the bank. For the auditors and accountants listening, they are bored with this, but I'm just explaining it for everyone else. Anyway, those reconciliations, they document the details of that difference. Okay? But if that difference is being created by an embezzlement for hundreds of thousands of dollars, you're not going to document money that I'm taking for myself in that reconciliation, are you? No. I mean, that would be hilarious, but also then the jig is up, okay? You have to figure out a way to make it look legitimate so nobody asks any questions. So to cover this up, Liz would misreport the daily warrants. Again, not sure about this terminology, but that's what they had. The daily warrants in this cash reconciliation, those were the expenses that the county had paid, but not yet recorded in their books. Okay? So this meant when reporting those cash reconciliations, Liz showed that those warrants that had cleared the bank, they just hadn't been posted to the books, but she was making it much higher than they actually were, right? So this allowed her to balance her report with the actual cash totals that were reflected in bank statements. And that helped fill in the gap of those declining account balances. She was hiding those wires herself in those daily warrants, okay? And a table in the lawsuit showed how much of those daily warrants were each year over the 10 years that they said she was stealing. So in year 1, the amount outstanding was $1.2 million. In year 2 is $925,000, on and on and on. Then in year 5, it was $4.6 million. In year 6, it was $5.5 million. 7, $8.7 million. Year 8, $2.9 million. Year 9, $4.3 million. And finally in year 10, $1.5 million. Okay. This led to the third way that Liz was covering her tracks. And that is, she had, by a certain point, she had taken so much money that the outstanding items couldn't plausibly explain the difference between the cash balance on the county's books with the balance shown by the bank, right? You're just like, that's not, how can that be? How could we have so many outstanding daily warrants, right? So Liz started creating fake investment statements that would serve as proof of the difference between the bank balance and the book balance. The lawsuit claimed that there were at least 5 fake statements. Now, remember, these are all just civil charges. In other words, they were part of a lawsuit. The county, Santa Cruz County, Arizona, was suing Liz. Nothing criminal. Nothing criminal yet. On November 19th, 2024, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Arizona brought criminal charges against Les Gutfahr, including 1 count of theft by a public official, 1 count of money laundering, and 1 count of tax evasion. Charges broke down the 187 wire transfers Liz made from 2014 through early 2024. When it started, the charges alleged that she made 6 wires for a total of $386,100. That made for an average transfer size of about $64,350. Okay. The number of transfers peaked in 2020 when she made 26 of them. That's every other week. And the total amount of embezzled funds that year was $4,525,000. But the largest dollar amount she stole in a single year of the scheme was in 2023 when she made 21 transfers into accounts she controlled for $11,350,000. So each transfer was more than $540,000. That is until Chase Bank notified the county about the suspicious transfers. Prosecutors alleged that Liz had already made 8 transfers in 2024 for more than $2.8 million. And in case you weren't following the trend, by that final year, the number of transfers was accelerating quite a bit. And that might have been what the bank noticed if it hadn't already noticed the sheer size of those transfers in 2023. The indictment followed very closely the lawsuit in explaining how Liz was able to cover up her theft. So, little recap. First, she falsified the reconciliations by showing outstanding items that the bank had accounted for, but the accounting system had not. Of course, had these items been posted to the accounting system, they were just being used to cover up the cash shortfall caused by Liz's embezzlement. Okay? When those outstanding items got to be too large, she created false statements, investment statements from UBS, and that made up the difference. So from 2021 through 2023, those amounts were $14 million, $17.2 million, and $26.5 million. Now, where did all this money go? Well, the lion's share of it was used to buy and renovate 4 major ranching properties, but also $7 million in purchases were made on credit cards, various livestock-related expenses, and automobiles. Oh, and for reasons not explained in the indictment, Liz did not file a personal tax return for the calendar years 2014 through 2023. And so the charges allege that she owed over $13 million in back taxes. Now, in all fairness, the county, they had a control in place for this. Liz was not unilaterally able to make these transfers. They had a 2-step process for wire transfers that required, first, the chief deputy treasurer to initiate a wire transfer. They did that with a computer token that was assigned to the deputy for that exact purpose. Okay? Only after the chief deputy initiated a wire transfer could a treasurer approve it using a separate token assigned to the treasurer for that exact purpose, for approving the wire. Okay? So there's 2 people there, right? But Liz was able to work around this 2-step process by good old-fashioned lying, just lying to her subordinates. She told her chief deputy that the transfers were going to a savings account where the county was earning interest. And so that was enough, apparently, to convince that deputy to give her her computer token to allow for the initiation of the transfers and basically rendering the entire process useless. So essentially no controls. Easily circumvented, I should say. Liz also manipulated her subordinates in a number of ways, including with gifts. She loaned her chief deputy $6,000 to buy a new air conditioner. The chief deputy told investigators that she had planned to repay that money after she retired. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like in a place like southern Arizona, where temperatures, don't go below 100 degrees for weeks on end, I feel like giving someone an air conditioner with no feasible plan for repayment, that sounds like a bribe to me. I don't know. Just feels like a bribe. Air conditioning? Yeah. She also paid for her deputy's cell phone. She allowed the chief deputy's sister to use one of her cars, which was apparently worth $3,000. I don't know about the car or the use. They didn't say. Anyway, the point is she loaned the sister of her subordinate a car. She paid bills for one of the secretaries, gave this person $1,500 for their birthday. And then there was a tax clerk who said that Gutfahr had given her son a generous gift when he got married. And then her daughter got married on one of her ranches. And then they went on a long weekend to San Marcos in Mexico. I don't know. With all that generosity and, combined with no oversight of Liz's position, basically no controls. Speaking of the oversight, county officials did not review the monthly cash reconciliation reports, according to the state's findings. And there was even a cash balance report that did not change by a single penny for 14 months. And that's kind of weird. It's not unheard of. Some money just sits, but maybe something that you would ask about, right? On November 21st, 2024, Liz Gutfahr pleaded guilty to embezzlement, money laundering, and tax evasion. Prior to sentencing, her attorney attempted to explain her actions. In court, her lawyer said, quote, "Miss Gutfahr committed one of the dumbest, ill-conceived, short-sighted, and most audacious crimes in Arizona state history. Her scheme was not well planned. She made no real effort to conceal her actions. Even a cursory review of financial records or publicly available information would have quickly uncovered her crimes." Okay, harsh. And not entirely true. Dumb? I don't know. I'd say by fraud standards, it feels pretty average. We have talked about way dumber frauds than this one. Way dumber. So, I don't know. Dumbest? Anyway, short-sighted? I don't know about that either. As we discussed, she carried this on for 10 years. That's not 10 years isn't short-sighted. Could it be longer-sighted? Sure. But short-sighted? I don't know. I don't think so. Audacious, a cursory review that would have uncovered it. All right, counselor, I'll give you those two. Okay? He went on to say, Ms. Gutfahr had no business ever becoming the treasurer in the first place. Okay, another quibble here. In the year 2025, I think we are all aware now that this is not really how politics works. Okay? If people who had no business serving in government couldn't serve in government, then I think we'd have a very different government right now. Not to mention, this is a local government, right? We're not even talking about the, federal government. Local government, just finding someone willing to do the job, that's hard enough. Now you're going to want somebody who's qualified, who has the chops to do the job. I mean, honestly, they're just looking for a body most of the time. Okay. Anyway, as for an actual explanation, he said, quote, she was a person suffering from severe depression and diminished capacity who was elected to run the county treasury without any real business experience or training in finance. It went on, Gutfahr's attorney says she thought she was basically borrowing money to build an ideal life for her family. Quote, Miss Gutfahr deluded herself into a pipe dream whereby she thought she could borrow surplus funds to establish successful real estate and cattle businesses and then repay the money with everyone, her family included, being none the wiser. It was obviously an illegal and ill-conceived idea, but Mrs. Gutfahr was not thinking clearly. Okay, so that's the supposed explanation. And I will just say that people who are committing fraud delude themselves in all kinds of ways. Okay? So you're not going to get a debate out of me there. But the idea that an elected official would believe that they had the right and ability to borrow surplus funds, whatever that means, to build up their side hustle, but still keep it a secret from their own family and taxpayers that they were elected to serve, that is kind of laughably unbelievable. But, he had a tough job, this lawyer. Anyway, the judge also must have thought that this was ridiculous because she sentenced Gutfahr to 10 years in prison and ordered her to pay over $51 million in restitution. So, what did we learn? Did we learn anything? I mean, plenty of old lessons revisited, right? Having controls is not enough. They have to be implemented. They have to operate effectively. Liz easily circumvented the two tokens or the two keys or whatever it has. It was very easy for her, and it had been effective. They would have had the two steps like they designed it, right? But they would have also documented every instance of not following the process, including an explanation for why it wasn't being followed. Like, oh, so-and-so is in a body cast and has been rendered mute, or has decided to wear duct tape over their mouth from now to the end of time. Whatever it is, you would know there would be an explanation for why it wasn't being followed. Okay? Not to mention, if you had someone else, not the treasurer, not the deputy, another person just regularly review these instances of non-compliance with this two-step transfer process, monitoring. If that was in place, they would have seen this and they'd be like, this is happening all the time. Why is this happening all the time? Right? Maybe not a perfect control, but that's kind of the framework of something that would have been maybe a little better. All right. So controls weren't happening. And, the employees were maybe a little too friendly with each other, travel, gifts, loans to subordinates with no, foreseeable repayment plan. I mean, loans to a subordinate is probably bad enough, right? Forget about if whether this was a perfectly structured debt instrument, as they said in business law class. But we've talked about all this before. If you're going to have a team of people doing treasury and or accounting type things, you're going to eliminate a lot of risk by having these people not like each other. How you achieve that, I don't know. But maybe you just hire generally disagreeable people and who would think on each other at the drop of a hat. That's who you want your accounting team to be. One other observation I'll just make, and I kind of talked about this, but Liz was well on her way to stealing more than Rita Crunwell, another local government employee, not elected, but nevertheless. But Liz was caught only after 10 years, and she had taken $39 million. She was like 3/4 of the way to Rita's haul, but she got greedy. I mean, obviously she was greedy, but maybe she got too greedy too soon, because she was already plenty greedy already. But, so greedy that a bank noticed, and banks have lots of money. So if you get a bank's attention, then yeah, maybe it's too much. So I guess what I'm saying is, just when you think frauds can't get worse, don't worry. They can get worse. They can definitely get worse. That's it for this episode. And remember, if you live in Arizona and your boss wants to treat you to a state-of-the-art Lennox or Rheem air conditioner, maybe take a beat to think about what they're really doing. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for stories, drop me a line at ohmyfraud@earmarkcpe.com or hit me up on LinkedIn. Oh My Fraud is created, written, produced, and hosted by me, Caleb Newquist. Zach Frank is my co-producer, audio engineer, and music supervisor. Laura Hobbs designed our logo. Rate, review, and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. If you listen on Earmark, that's where you get CPE. The only place to get CPE, I think, for podcasts. I don't know. I think that's right. Anyway, Earmark, CPE. Do it. Join us next time for more avarice, swindlers, and scams from stories that will make you say, oh, my fraud.